And don't talk about yourself. Don't be like a bad first date, constantly on and on about yourself, right? And use that and try and change.
Hello and welcome to episode 41 of Rockstar CMO FM. The M is for marketing, the F is for, well, you decide. As you're probably wondering, does the world need another effing marketing podcast? I'm your host, Ian Truscott, founding editor of Rockstar CMO, your monthly hit of marketing street knowledge, where we share straight-talking marketing advice from our community of writers and CMOs. And this weekly podcast is my excuse to chat to that band. You can find us at rockstarcmo.com and at rockstarcmo on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. This episode was recorded on Friday, the 18th of December. Thank you for joining us. I hope you've had a good week and that you are well, keeping safe, and staying as sane as you feel you need to be. If it's your tradition, happy holidays. Merry Christmas. I hope you're ready for a wonderful week. On the set list this week, Christine Bailey, CMO of Valita, again joins me for a final dip into the pages of her book, Customer Insight Strategies. I chat to Piet Sangerman, who has just started his own agency, the wonderfully named Yamazoni, and I again round off the week in the Rockstar CMO virtual bar with my friend and content marketing guru, Robert Rose. Right, let's get started, shall we? If you're a regular listener, you will know that for the last couple of weeks, we've been running a short series diving into Christine Bailey's first book. Christine is the CMO of Valita and is a regular contributor to our Rockstar CMO community, sharing her wonderful B2B marketing experience gained at big brands like Hewlett-Packard and Cisco Systems, and is an award-winning marketing professional who was once voted #1 woman in tech by B2B Marketing. And she has a doctorate, DBA, in customer insights from the Cranfield School of Management here in the UK. Christine recently added author to her list of achievements, and her book, Customer Insight Strategies, How to Understand Your Audience and Create Remarkable Marketing, was published last month by Kogan Page. This is the last of our 4-part series. So far, we've covered what inspired the book, how to apply insights to marketing planning, applying insights to driving customer acquisition and retention, and in this conversation, we focus on the last chapters of the book, how to put this into action. Welcome back, Christine. So we're in part 4 of our 4-part series of looking at your book, Customer Insight Strategies, that I have here on my desk. And we've covered the intro. We've talked about what the book was about. And so hopefully people will go back and listen to that. We talked about insights in the planning of what we're going to do. We've talked about customer acquisition, and we've talked about the customer journey and how insights goes across all of that. Now we get to the final part where the rubber's hitting the road, right? We're in the final part of your book where you're talking about how we make it happen. So in the final chapters, the first thing you talk about, and this comes up a lot on this in this podcast, is about the technology and the implications of taking this approach for tech practitioners. So from a technology perspective, we cover that a lot here. So what's the key takeaway of your experience of working with technology when it comes to customer insights?
God, I hope you're not going to limit me to one. I'm impressed that I got to chapter 10 before I talked about technology, and I thought I cannot have a book on insights without talking about technology. I mean, you know, we were already in a world that was going through digital transformation, and that's just been massively accelerated through COVID. The world has gone digital, and of course part of that is that we are collecting more and more data. There's Scott Brinker has his famous Martech super graphic, and this year it's got 8,000 Martech solutions, and no surprise to me whatsoever, data is the fastest growing category from last year, so 25.5% growth in the data category. Yeah. And equally, no surprise that 83% of marketers say they feel data blind. They're absolutely overwhelmed by the amount of technology and data that we have. But that's no excuse. Every marketer has to become more data competent. It's not something we can just leave to the data scientists. It literally permeates every aspect of a marketing role. But we shouldn't despair. It's become a lot easier. These tools, these analytics tools, have become much easier for everybody to use and have that analysis at a click of a button. And in the book, when we go about selecting the technology, because of course there's a lot of technology that's free now. You don't necessarily have to pay for it. So Carlos Doughty from the Martech Alliance talks about the 4 Ps: plan, people, platforms, and process. And he has a 5-step approach to how you should be selecting your technologies. So that's quite a good thing. And as I said, there's like an increasing appetite for paid analytics, even though you can still get a lot of stuff from the free providers. And I guess the key thing around technology is that artificial intelligence and machine learning take a lot of the guesswork out of marketing. And we're going to increasingly rely on the AI and machine learning. Having said that, to start with, go back to the basics. Very few companies have got this nirvana of the 360-degree view of customers. We still don't own everything in the customer journey. You've got service support, online, offline. That's still probably the toughest challenge, is to get the single view of the customer before you can start getting more sophisticated to that. But I would always say, always consider the problem you're trying to solve before you decide on the technology. It's very easy to get sucked into the hype.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that really is a top tip, because I think at the moment there are a lot of marketers that aren't getting the basics right, and yet they layer on top of it increasingly more sophisticated marketing technology that they're not using. I think because they like the shiny baubles. I think it's really interesting. And of course, Carlos, I enjoy his work at the Martech Alliance. I should get him on the show, actually. I think he's contributed to Rockstar CMO before, but really interesting guy. So finally, I like this. We've just gone from tech, but you sort of closed the book out talking about humanizing marketing and the importance of being ethical, which I think go hand in hand. A lot of the way trust is built in brands, isn't it? Is about the things we stand for, not this sort of rubbish purpose washing rubbish, but genuinely what an organization stands for and exposing the human side. Certainly that's what I try and do in content marketing. So tell us a bit about that, about your view there about humanizing marketing.
Yeah, well, humans are unpredictable creatures. I think I said in a previous podcast, what we say is one thing, but what we do is another. So this is where insight is invaluable to us, because it tells us about behavior and helps us understand why humans act in the way that they do. So we need to find ways of making more emotional connections with customers. And I love the quote from Rory Sutherland, who's the vice chairman of Ogilvy, and he's written a book called The Surprising Power of Ideas That Don't Make Sense. And he says, for a business to be truly customer focused, it needs to ignore what people say. And you're like, And then he says, instead, it needs to concentrate on what people feel. And that's been said several times. That Marla and Anne said it's not what people say or do, it's how they make you feel. So how can we use insights to really sort of get to remember that there's a human, at the end of the data. Yes, we're talking about human beings, and basically the gateway is the data is the gateway to helping understand what makes our customers tick. And we talked earlier quite a lot about an important part of humanizing your marketing is to really dig deep to understand the why. And if you understand your own why, that will help you understand the why behind your customer choices, and then you obviously make sure they're both in alignment. But never forget the human being at the other side of the data.
Yeah, and it's interesting, isn't it? In this particular segment of the book that we're looking at, we've gone from tech, which is often misused and dehumanizes, and we just get them, we're a victim of the marketing machine, aren't we? In all the emails and stuff that we receive. And people are forgetting that a MQL or a lead or a contact is a person, right? So, and that they're the same as you. Would you like to receive this email? Is often a thing I've asked people when we've looked at campaigns, And, so I think humanizing is good. And what about the ethical nature? How do we express that when you're talking about customer insight?
Yeah, I love what Edwina Dunn says when she says, just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. And that's, we can all think of that when we're thinking about the ethics of collecting data. And she picks up on a couple of key issues that we talk about in the book. Is the first one is it's really important to own the data, and the companies that own the data will be the ones that win, and using those to understand your customers. But most importantly, you've got to use that data in an ethical way, because using it in an unethical way, the trust washing, the woke washing, is just going to turn people off. So you have to be ethical to win in this world.
Yeah, well, I think it's a nice thought to finish off our little mini series on. I've really enjoyed chatting to you as usual, Christine. So thank you very much for that. Yeah, no, you're very welcome. And so Christine has written Customer Insight Strategies, How to Understand Your Audience and Create Remarkable Marketing. It's available on many good bookshops, including the big one, Amazon, and is published by Kogan Page. Is that correct?
That is correct, yeah.
Excellent. Well, I'll include a link to it in the show notes, as I have every week. And it's a shame to leave our series, Christine, but thank you very much, and I'll speak to you soon.
Thank you, Ian. Bye-bye.
Cheers, Christine. Bye-bye. Thanks, Christine. As I mentioned, sadly, that was the last part of our series, and I'm not sure I've done her book justice with my questions. It covers a lot of ground, has quotes from almost 40 interviews, some fascinating real-world examples from Christine's career, and is definitely more practical than theory. As a reminder, it's called Customer Insight Strategies, How to Understand Your Audience and Create Remarkable Marketing. It was published last month by Kogan Page, and I will, of course, include links to Christine, her book, Twitter and LinkedIn in the show notes. Right, on to the interview. Piet Segerman is a strategic messaging consultant. He helps founders, CEOs, and sales and marketing leaders build better strategic messaging with scientific insights. Piet works in his native Belgium, the UK, and the US, and is a regular speaker at marketing technology conferences worldwide, presumably now on Zoom. An incorrigible enthusiast, and as you'll hear, Piet is passionate about marketing, technology, and neuroscience. I hope you enjoy this conversation. Welcome to Rockstar CMO FM, Piet. How are you?
Very good. Thank you, Ian. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. I've known you a few years as the content marketing guru, I guess, or leader at Chili Publish. And I know you're quite modest about your work there. But you've recently decided to focus on doing your own thing, Yamazoni. Tell us about that.
So I'm now a marketing consultant, not unlike yourself, helping mainly founders, CEOs, and sales and marketing leaders for startups and scale-ups in the B2B SaaS sphere to build their initial messaging and marketing.
Hey, cool. That's cool. And then I have to ask about the name Yamazoni. What inspired that?
I'm glad you asked. It's actually a Flemish expression, and people mutter it under their breath. They say Yamazoni, and it loosely translated, it would mean you can't just do it like that, which is, of course, all I do.
Right. I like that. And is that the spelling? Is that how we would say that?
Oh no, that's probably Japanicized a bit. It's actually it would be 4 words.
Right. And should we all start saying that? Do you think, muttering under our breath when we're traveling?
A lot of my customers are actually starting to use it as a thing. When they disagree with somebody, they go Yamazoni.
Yamazoni.
Even the people that don't speak Flemish.
I love that. And so we'll look into your background. I always ask the interviewers about their background, how they got into marketing. And your background actually is quite interesting because you were in business development and you worked for Apple and Kodak, which are 2 really interesting companies on different sides of the innovation and the path that they've both gone on. And tell us about that journey and how you found yourself in marketing.
Oh, I basically got into marketing by accident.
So many of my interviewees have.
It was just a logical next step. I mean, my background in the beginning, way back, was technical. I was in a technical role. I was a technical trainer for Creo, who got acquired by Kodak in the end. And from then on, I was doing some night classes and graduated, wanted to do something else, and they got me into a sales role. or a distribution management role. Did that for a while, then went into pre-sales, worked with some really, really, really interesting and really gifted salespeople that I learned a lot from. You learn so much by just sitting at the table, pretending to be technically inclined, but you see these guys at work and it's just awesome. And then Apple came knocking and said, yeah, we need somebody to run business development for the pro markets. So pro audio, pro video, pro photo. So I did that for a while, and then had a whole midlife crisis, took a year off, got an old timer car, so, and took a year
that could not have been your midlife, mate. That was fairly early for a midlife crisis.
Maybe I'll have another one. I took a year off and traveled and got back in, and I bumped into the guys at Chili Publish at a trade show in London. I was living there at the time. And they got me into a business development role for DACH for the solution. I think I was employee number 5 or 6. It was way in the beginning. And from there, I went to Showpad. And Showpad is a sales enablement solution. I did product marketing there, and that was my first taste of true marketing. And I liked it. I liked the type of work I was doing there. So when I then went back to Chili Publisher after a while, they said, well, you're now in the marketing team.
I was going to ask you what inspired you to get into marketing, but like so many of us, you sort of stumbled your way in there. I also like the pre-sale, the tech and the pre-sales background, because many B2B marketers that I talk to come from that background. Same with myself, and I totally empathize with you as a pre-sales guy sitting at the table with these sales guys, and just like, I know you're there to answer the hard questions, but you're often seeing. I mean, really good sales guys have a craft, don't they? I mean, it's often underrated, isn't it? How what it takes to become a salesperson. And so, what do you see now that you've sort of been on both sides? What do you see as the relationship between business development and marketing?
I think the difference is getting thinner. They're getting closer to each other. It's a more unified approach. I think it came along with the whole movement for sales enablement, where marketing took on a very big responsibility to start driving the discussion that salespeople were having. Whereas before, back when I was doing business development the first time, we did whatever we liked. If the numbers were there, we could create our own content, build our own stories. We do whatever we liked. That's no longer on these days. So you get a lot more support from marketing, and marketing has gotten closer to sales. Also with the whole inbound methodology, where a lead comes in, becomes a marketing qualified lead, becomes a sales qualified lead, and can be pushed back by sales. That was new. So I think it meshes together a bit closer than it used to.
Yeah. It's in each other's interest to bond that relationship. And on that, this year we've had to face the pandemic. There's a lot of talk about virtual selling anyway, and that the pandemic has really accelerated that. Do you think that's tightened that relationship now that we realize how much of the sale actually happens before a sales guy meets anybody in B2B? Absolutely.
I think what's happening now is, these are numbers that I know from my Showpad days, like 70% of the customer journey is complete before people pick up the phone or people agree to a meeting. So you have a lot of groundwork to do before you even start the conversation. And I think that's gonna go more in that direction, because face-to-face calls, let's face it, for the foreseeable future are off the table. And it's all going to be either a virtual meeting or it's going to be remote.
Yeah. And have you seen, and is that something to do with your move from business development to focus on content? Is that what's driven you to focus on content from a marketing perspective?
No, I thought there was not enough good content, and I wanted to.
I love it.
I wanted to be part of the solution and not part of the problem.
And I've actually working with some clients on this sort of thing as well, and that the when the rubber hits the road at the business development end, that's often the part that marketing forget, don't they? When they're creating content, they think about top of funnel, they think about the website, they think about thought leadership, but often what is it that's in the hands of the BD guys? Yep. Is often forgotten. I wrote about it because I was calling this the sales gap, in that we sort of we don't have that in our content plans. Is that where you focus?
Sales gap is real, because, and it's a natural thing. Marketing is measured with specific metrics these days, and these metrics are all about traffic and conversion, but nothing after that. So the entire customer journey, they're not really measured on anything after that. That becomes the salespeople's responsibility. And between the two, there's this gray area where I think content can make a really, really big difference.
Yeah, I love that. And I mean, and the poor BD guys are just kind of looking in shared drives, figuring out whatever it is they can send to a client, and it needs to be more coordinated. I also noticed that in your BD roles, and I think you alluded to it just a moment ago with what you did when you joined Chili Publish, you've opened up new markets, and I think that's a challenge for sales and marketing in many organizations. It's not just new geographic markets, but many organizations are trying to move into different audiences or bringing out new products. What's your advice and approach when it comes to new markets?
Well, I mean, I've done 2 episodes, I think, in that field. One was opening up a market in the German speaking area. And that was the main challenge there was language. But that's fixable, right? You can fix that. Yeah. The second one was when Chili Publisher became less of a web to print solution and more of a brand management solution. Mm-hmm. Your whole narrative had to change. You're talking to completely different people, where a printer, for example, would be more focused on survival and potentially growth. A brand manager would be focused on brand governance, would be on how do I operationalize my brand? How do I make it more available to people? How do I stop? Yeah. So the narrative drives a lot of the development of a market, I think. Right. And if you spend enough time doing that and working on that strategic narrative and working on that messaging, you'll have a lot more success in those markets.
Yeah. And that, I mean, again, it's about storytelling and content by the sounds of things.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. And getting that nailed. And then if we sort of come up to date really of what you're doing right now, and as we've talked about, you've turned your focus to content strategy and messaging, and you talk about, and I've watched some of your talks on YouTube, you talk about science-based strategic messaging. Tell us about that.
Yeah, again, I mean, I had to scratch my own itch a bit. I looked around and said, if you look at certain things that we do on communication, graphic design has certain rules that make a design work. And we talk about, contrast and white space and color. And if you use those things consistently, that becomes a brand identity. Language has grammar, specific rules on how to communicate from sender to receiver. And I wanted something like that for ideas and concepts, and I couldn't find it. There were some books on the stuff like the Thinking Fast and Slow by Kahneman or Influence by Cialdini, but it was very basic. It had like 12 principles, and that was it. And I knew from sales roles that there was a lot of material out there about influence and persuasion. Right. So I started thinking maybe I could apply this to the customer journey. It turns out you can. There's hundreds of insights and techniques and tactics that come from various scientific fields, cognitive science, neuroscience, behavioral economics, and you can use them all along the customer journey. Yeah. And so where do you start with something like that if you're working with a new client? First, there's an awareness that needs to happen. Like they need to understand that a buyer on the buyer journey, there are certain predictable states that people find themselves in, ranging from blissfully unaware to ready to buy. That's like the first aha moment. And then we go into the creation of a bespoke messaging framework. And you can see that like a menu. It's basically everything you say about yourself as a company, but we organize it through steps in the customer journey for maximum effect. And the method I'm using, I call it the 5 intents model, is built on 5 clear communication intents. The first one being, fascinate. You want to fascinate. So we live in an attention economy. You have to earn the brain cycles.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you have to be relevant and remarkable and memorable. Yeah. So the second intent is educate. And this is where you explain what you do in ways that are easy to process and likely to be remembered. And there's tricks to that. The third one is differentiate, show how you are different better, specifically important when there's other vendors at the table. But also comparing yourself to the status quo. What's the cost of doing nothing, right?
Yes, absolutely.
The fourth intent, and now you're going further down the customer journey, is validate. This is where you establish trust. You prove what you say. You show your customer testimonials. You do ROI calculations, all the things that make customers feel more confident. Yeah. And finally, motivate. That's where the ink hits the paper. You create urgency and you ask yourself, why now? You engineer good, better, best pricing. You use decoy pricing. You make sure part of the offer expires. So all of these things that trigger very primal fears and desires that humans have, really. And at the end of that, the deliverable is a framework that can be used by anybody in the company, mainly marketing, but also sales, to know when to say what to a customer in a specific phase in the customer journey.
Right. So what you're saying there, this is a narrative for the whole company. Just drive that all the way from top of funnel with marketing, all the way through to what the BD people are going to say if they lift up the phone or they're on a Zoom call or whatever.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And the thing is, so the four last intents, the educate, differentiate, validate, and motivate, those are pretty static. They evolve as the company evolves and as the product and the offering evolves. But the first one, the fascinating one, that's where the action is, because that's your top of funnel. That's where you need a lot of different things to attract more people.
Yeah. No, I love that model. And the other thing is that do you find that people are going through that process linear, or do you see prospects hopping in and out of that, or your clients' prospects popping in and out of those different phases?
It's definitely not linear. I wish it were. I think it would make my life a lot easier. But I always say two things. Like, one, the customer journey is a non-linear thing, because people will go back to certain states. If you expose them to new information, they will have to go through a number of steps again to feel confident. The second reason why it's non-linear is that if you're in a B2B context and you're a salesperson or you're a company trying to sell something, part of the buying team you're never going to meet. Right? Yeah. So you need to have your internal champion enabled to go in and make the internal case for your solution. So that's like another cycle that you're going through. Yeah. And I also like to say that there's no hard lines between intents. If your customer gives you a hint that they're ready for a specific piece of information, don't wait until you're ready in that phase of the customer journey. It kind of flows up. And like one of the differentiation factors, for example, if you want to differentiate your company, you can do so in a way that builds confidence. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's one of them. I mean, we see that. I mean, you see that in your own inbox, don't you? The way that people just assume that the nurture program is happening in a certain way, and I've actually had people on my teams try and create these campaigns where they're making assumptions where somebody is in the journey at some point, and they talk to them like that, and you just can't do that because people move around. This is really fascinating, Pete, and as usual, and we've had a number of conversations, we could do this for quite some time this afternoon, probably into the evening with an adult beverage if we were allowed to. But I have one final question. We have a regular feature on Rockstar CMO called The Swim Pool, inspired by rock stars that over the years have thrown things into swimming pools. It's our portal to hell for all the bullshit and snake oil that seems to plague this industry we love. What would you throw into the Rockstar CMO swimming pool?
So one of the things I get a lot with customers is they've read a book, right? They've read Simon Sinek's Start With Why. And they go, oh, we need to start with why. And I always cringe a little bit, right? And I say, well, instead of starting with why, which is going to trigger one thing, it's going to trigger a company talking about itself again, right? We believe in challenging the status quo, the whole story. Start with why should they care? Yeah. And don't talk about yourself. Don't be like a bad first date, constantly on and on about yourself, right? And use that and try and change the standpoint to where the first point of contact is no longer about what you offer. You're not allowed, like one of the things I say to my customers is you're not allowed to talk about yourself in the fascination stage. You just not. It's all about the people your audience.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it's probably quite a good idea if they don't talk about themselves for a number of the stages, particularly on the front page of the website. So what am I chucking in then? Am I chucking in clients that read books, or am I chucking in books? And I know that, I mean, we're only recording the audio, so you can't see that behind me there is actually the book that you've just referred to, a number of these books. So that's an excellent suggestion. I love that. I think actually the real thing to chuck in swim pool there is that self-reflection all the time, isn't there? And that focus on yourself and all that stuff. So that's brilliant. Yeah. Thank you very much, Pete. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
No, you're very welcome. And of course, we're going to be, this is the episode just before the holidays. I'm recording this on Friday before the holidays. So happy holidays or happy Christmas, whatever is your celebration. And I'll speak to you very soon.
All right, thanks a lot. Let's talk soon.
Cheers, mate. Bye-bye. Thank you, Pete. a super chap. Very much enjoy my conversations with him, and I'll include his links in the show notes, plus some videos of him speaking on this topic of science in marketing. It's a fascinating topic. Right, it's Friday evening here at our London penthouse. Time to wind down for the weekend. And as we're in lockdown, what better way than to join my friend and content marketing mentor, Robert Rose, in the Rockstar CMO Virtual Bar. Good evening, Robert. What are you drinking?
Oh, hello, my friend. It's great to see you here. I guess the week before wonderful Christmas.
It is, yeah.
We are sitting here, and the depth of, I guess it's let's see, as today falls, it's very close to the solstice, if not very, and we're right there.
Nice.
Yeah. Well, it's a very simple drink tonight. As we look out of the window and hopefully see some snow on the ground and all those kinds of things, I'm drinking tonight a glass of wine, but it's a very special wine. It's it's a very expensive wine.
It's the season.
Yeah, it's the season. Exactly right. It's a 2014 Stag's Leap Petite Syrah, which is a California wine. But yeah, it's an amazing, very big red wine, and it's just lovely.
Yes, I've had the good fortune to try. I don't know whether it was that year, but I've certainly had the Stag's Leap Syrah. I was fortunate to work for somebody who was French in the US and would seek out the good stuff when we were having, the celebratory drinks, and that's.
They make a number of reds that are just amazing, and this Petite Syrah is one of them.
Yeah, nice, very nice. And I do love a big red. And one of these days, Robert, we need to crack open a bottle of something big and red. So. Let me, I'll cast my eye again over my desktop bar and see what I have. You're drinking wine again, and I'm going to ask you whether you've put ice in it, which you clearly haven't. But my replication of whatever you're drinking starts with ice. Now, I don't have any red wine, but I do have Hendrick's gin. So that's how I can't make any kind of connection there, can I? Apart from that, they're both.
It's not really. I mean, I heard the ice there. I mean, it's, yeah.
Yeah, I know. So I'll stick some gin in just to sort of hide the fact that I'm not as classy as you are. And then I drinking neat gin while you're drinking that fine glass of wine would be wrong. So what have I got here? I've got some tonic, some Fever Tree cucumber tonic. See, I'm getting classy. I've got some cucumber tonic. It's getting a little bit better.
Yeah, that's almost red wine, but
splash a bit in there. Yeah,
it is plant-based, so
that's true. I don't get the colours right on this show at all. So let me give that a go.
Yeah.
Oh, that's very nice. Not quite the same as what you're drinking, but very nice all the same. And I think I could probably drink these every week. So what was that called again, Robert?
That was called a Petite Syrah.
Oh,
I mean, it's not really a special name for that one, but nonetheless.
Well, this is like no Petite Syrah I've ever had. I can tell you that for nothing.
Yeah.
As I take another sip. Very nice. Thank you, Robert. And this Petite Syrah, and a wonderful conversation I imagine to be had, but where would we be drinking these?
I'll tell you, as we talked about last week, I've been longing to travel and go places, and a thing came up in my email this week of a place that I so want to go. We've talked about this country before, but we have not talked about this place, and you've actually been there. I have not, which is New Zealand.
Yeah.
And the place that came up was a place called South Island, New Zealand. And it just looks, it's got that Lord of the Rings kind of look, but it's just absolutely spectacular. And I've never been there, and I long to go there.
Yeah.
So I think, in the spirit of we can go anywhere on the planet with these little drinks, this is where we would have to go with this wonderful bottle of wine.
That sounds wonderful. But the weird thing for us, after you've talked about snow and the festivities, is I wonder what it's like celebrating Christmas in the summer. Or the holidays, I should say, for our
well, we get it. So here, in Southern California, of course, I have grown used to Christmases that are, in the, in Fahrenheit anyway, anywhere between 75 and 85 degrees, so it feels a bit like summer here sometimes at Christmas. But truly, yes, as we would be there, it would be the middle of summer in South Island.
Yeah, well, let's face it. If you were getting those temperatures in December, that is summer for us here. So.
Exactly. That's the middle of August there.
Yeah, it might, and it might not be raining, and then we'd all get burned.
Yes, exactly.
I'm obviously talking to you from the UK for listeners that don't know. All right, so this sounds absolutely idyllic. So we're coming to the holidays in beautiful South Island of New Zealand. Once we've exchanged some wonderful gifts and some beautiful bottles of red wine, what would we be discussing?
Well, what I've been thinking of late is, as you've heard me talk about a couple of weeks ago at my Content Marketing World keynote, I became fascinated with this study book white paper that a guy by the name of James Heskett wrote called The Service Profit Chain. And if anybody wants to know more about it, just Google service profit chain and you'll come up with a bunch of links, and especially a Harvard Business Review article that talks it through. And it's just such an amazing, wonderful model for customer service. And we've taken it and sort of applied it to a marketing top of the journey model that we're calling the content profit chain, and it's basically how do we create fans with our marketing. But I was reminded of it because I was thinking about this as I was thinking about traveling and that sort of thing. There was this time, and I was actually coming back from London, and when I was coming back, the captain of the plane was walking up and down the aisle. And as he was walking up and down the aisle, he was sort of having a very relevant and personal conversation with everybody. It wasn't just sort of like, welcome, 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 like you would expect. It was sort of, he stopped at, there was one lady that was, quite nervous, and he was talking with her and reassuring her. And then another was a child, and he pulled out a little toy airplane and gave it to the kid. And then another, person was, was a business guy, and he was having sort of a conversation about sports and sort of that sort of thing. And as he passed my seat, he came by, and I asked him, I said, basically said, do you do this every flight? And he said, yeah, I do. And I said, why? I said, because what's the point, right? Yeah. I didn't actually say it like that. I said it in a much nicer way. And he was lovely about it. Yeah. And he said something really interesting. And he said, well, because people are going to love what we do or hate what we do based on a lot of things. He said, but, we play a tiny part of that. But if I'm happier, my crew is happier, we have a good time. And if we're having a good time, the passengers are having a good time. It just makes the job better, right? It makes his job more fun. Yeah. And I thought that was a great lesson because, so many, we talked a couple of weeks ago about sort of the passion and marketing and having fun and all of that. Yeah. But I thought this was a really interesting thing, especially as we're approaching the holidays, which is, for those that walk and work in larger companies, that company's going to get good ratings, bad ratings. You might work for a company that consistently gets bad ratings, and you work your butt off, right? You work your butt off to make things good for customers. But I think one of the things that we have to remind ourselves is that we need to make things good for us too. And by making things good for us, we can create good things for our customers.
That's absolutely right back to what we were discussing a couple of weeks ago about the joy and having joy. And I think if as a group of people you're having fun, you're going to achieve more together, aren't you? And it's also related to the partnering thing we were talking about last week. People bond, don't they? That are having fun.
Yeah, that's right. And it's going back to the Heskett thing, this was what he said was, critical for delivering differentiated customer experiences for customer service, was that the rank and file frontline workers were happy.
Yeah.
And the whole chain part of what he called the service profit chain was the chain was linking great customer service all the way back to happy employees.
Yeah.
And basically, putting in the tools and the cultures and the, effort to make employees really happy. And I think one of the things that we have to remember is that it's not just the company's responsibility to make us happy. It's our responsibility to make us happy.
Yeah, true.
And that's especially true when we're thinking about content and marketing and, and the strategies that we do, is how can we commit to not only creating great experiences for customers, but how can we commit to creating great experiences that make us happy? Because by doing so, we will enable ourselves to create those amazing experiences. So it's not about just making somebody happy to make yourself miserable, right? It's about how do we win and win?
Yeah, and I think that marketing plays a role there, doesn't it? Because obviously most of the time us marketers, we're communicating outside the four walls. But if we can make a contribution to the communication internally and appear and create this, story of fun, of who this organization are, and tap into that and convey that, you change the culture of the business.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And that's the only way culture changes, is when the culture changes. You know what I mean? I know that sounds recursive, but it's true. You don't change culture by, the boss coming in and putting a piñata up or throwing a balloon or a pizza party, right? And saying, everybody be happy.
Yeah.
The way culture changes is when everybody, organically becomes happy because they're working to be happy.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think as well, at the moment, this has become a challenge, right? Because everybody's working remotely. I know you guys are still locked down and we're all spending so much time on Zoom. It's incredibly difficult to create those happy, casual moments when you're all the time just in meetings. And how do you create that? How do you create the fun in a Zoom? I mean, we were just talking about it as a team just today. And, how do you create fun in a Zoom?
Yeah. It's one of those things you gotta find it, right?
Yeah.
It's I think it's that classic when you think about it, it's the we often we get wrapped around the axle of this sometimes, but we talk about Columbus didn't discover America, he found America. It's like you didn't discover that thing, you found it. Was always there, you just found it.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like that, right? The happiness, the joy, the great experiences, you don't discover those things. You sort of they're there. You just gotta as a team, as an individual, you got to go find them.
Right. That's really interesting. And I also think it's interesting that the analogy that you're telling is an airline one, because that's the classic, the only real stories about service from airlines are really good or really terrible, right? So, and I think that that's the way we think as humans, don't we? We only comment about the really terrible or the really bad services. So if we are going to create these moments, we better make sure they're really good.
Yeah, exactly.
Because they get shared, don't they? And you're telling a story, and so many people are probably telling a story of, oh mate, well, that pilot that gave my kid this plane. I mean, that just spreads, doesn't it?
Right. Well, it is those frontline workers, right? I mean, and even more these days it used to be frontline workers had sort of front and center attention of customers.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now frontline workers have the attention of audiences and leads and opportunities as well, right? You know, we're all creating social media, we're all creating content on the web, we're all creating, you know, these experiences that, you know, that these content marketing experiences that are in many ways driven by our own, you know, user quote unquote generated content from our, you know, from our employees. And all of that counts. And, you know, so, you know, the last thing you want is some sales guy, you know, completely botching something by, you know, by posting something to their social media account or, you know, and, you know, it's, of course, those things aren't if, they're when, right? When they're going to happen.
True.
But having a culture that actually helps facilitate that is what's critical.
Yeah, exactly. And don't go, because you're going to have a huge audience if you break somebody's guitar, just to keep flogging the airline analogy there. So I mean, you
that's a blast from the past.
You will definitely find your audience then.
You will definitely find your audience. That's true. Actually, if you want to find your audience, go do something really stupid. Yeah, you will find your audience.
So with the so you at the beginning of this, you said that it was something that you talked about in your keynote. Is it something? I mean, I'll obviously include a link to the show notes to the service profit chain. But what's the is there somewhere where you've written about it that I can refer to in the show notes?
Oh, sure. Yeah. If you look at my keynote from Content Marketing World, and really just a lot of the stuff I've been talking about these days has been, you know, I just did a keynote for one of the digital summit events here where I talked about this, and there's a lot on our blog these days around this idea.
I like, and also I wanted to pick up with, I mean, we've run out of time, but I wanted to pick up on this idea of the content profit chain. I think that sounds to me like the title of a book, right there, right? So I think
well, I would take it, except the fact that it's you know, it's I wouldn't want to step on Heskett's toes there.
Well, you're very considerate. So we've talked about your blog there. So that's on contentadvisory.net. I'm now doing your promotion for you. But when we spin the dial on the interwebs and we're looking for you on social media, where would we find you?
You know, contentadvisory.net is great. It's my little center of the universe these days, and you know, I would say it's a great place to start. And then, of course, on the social media, I'm Robert_Rose on the Twitter, and LinkedIn. I'm but a search away.
But a search away, absolutely. And if search is too tough, I will put that in the show notes, and all the links will be there. So thank you very much, Robert. And as I ask you every week, will I see you next week in the bar?
I have a strong feeling the answer to that is, let me my magic 8 ball here. Yes.
I look forward to it. Cheers, Robert. Thank you, Robert. I will, of course, include a link to the paper that Robert referred to, Putting the Service Profit Chain to Work by James L. Heskett, in the show notes, along with all the links to Robert and his work. So that's a wrap on episode 41 of the Rockstar CMO effing marketing podcast. Thank you for dropping a dime into your podcasting jukebox, selecting our track, and jiving along with us. I hope you enjoyed the show. Thanks again to Christine for sharing her insights, to Piet for the wonderful conversation, and of course to Robert for propping up our virtual Rockstar CMO bar. If you like my guests, please give them a mention, click their links, follow them, take a look at their work. I really appreciate their time. I will, of course, include all their links in the show notes at rockstarcmo.com/podcast, where you can also find all our previous episodes. So, does the world need another effing marketing podcast? I would love to know what you think. Drop us some feedback, a review, subscribe, share, or just keep listening. I'm glad you're here. Next week, it's a special Christmas present for me, as I'll be chatting to our resident rockstar CMO, Ted Rubin. I'm looking forward to that, although slightly nervously about recording it. And you heard the man. It will be my pleasure to welcome Robert Rose back to the Rockstar CMO virtual bar. Until then, enjoy the holidays. I've been your host, Ian Truscott, founding editor of rockstarcmo.com, and I hope you'll join us again next week here at Rockstar CMO FM.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Christy Heiler hosts a fantastic podcast called Own It. Christy, tell us more about the show.
Own It is all about celebrating women and non-binary advertising agency owners. We talk about buying out of the boys' club of advertising because less than 1% of ad agencies are owned by women.
And where can people subscribe?
You can find the podcast at untilyouownit.com. We're also on the Marketing Podcast Network at marketingpodcast.net. And of course, you can subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard her. Go subscribe. This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.